could it be? Did he get blown away with the doghouse?
My husband's face turned pale as he looked at a corner of the yard.
This is what I call discipline.
He said, tying our son to the doghouse. And even though he knew a hurricane was approaching, he just left for a trip without a second thought. When we returned home, he stood frozen in the empty yard, panic setting in. I'll never forgive him. Watching him secretly from inside the house, I glared at him, my anger boiling over. My mom had been frail ever since I could remember. She was in and out of the hospital frequently, so she couldn't care for me and my younger sister the way she wanted to. Because of that, my sister and I always supported each other growing up. My sister, Karen, got married young and moved out, but I continued helping her and her husband however I could. When I met and married Max, I dreamed of having a relationship as loving as Karen's. At the beginning of our marriage, Max was helpful around the house, and we had the kind of relationship I had always wanted. However, things changed when our son, Ethan, was born. Hey, could you help me out a little? Maybe clean up after dinner or give Ethan his bath. Anything would help.
I'm exhausted from work. You're on parental leave, so this stuff is all your responsibility.
But I haven't had a proper night's sleep because of Ethan's crying. I can't do everything on my own. With bags under my eyes and feeling utterly exhausted, I turned to my husband for help, but he completely brushed me off. Worse yet, he lashed out at me, shouting in anger.
You're not even working. Stop trying to dump everything on me.
I'm not. It's just that taking care of our baby is a 24/7 job, and I can't do it alone. If he expected me to do the housework as his wife and take care of Ethan as his mother, then Max should also step up as a husband and a father, sharing the responsibilities of housework and parenting with me. I told him this again and again, but each time he'd just glare at me.
You're always trying to slack off.
And with that, he would end the conversation. Before long, Max was always grumpy when he was home. If he didn't like what I made for dinner, he'd throw the food away. What are you doing? Don't waste food.
Shut up. If you didn't make such lazy meals, this wouldn't happen.
Ethan's care is my top priority, so we have no choice but to eat frozen meals. No matter how much I explained, Max wouldn't budge, and I was left heartbroken every time I saw perfectly good food tossed in the trash. Eventually, I was the one who gave in emotionally. He won't listen no matter how much I try. I'll just have to manage everything on my own. After deciding that, life felt a bit lighter. I was physically exhausted, but at least I stopped feeling disappointed by him. However, when my maternity leave was about to end, I decided to ask him once again for support. But the result was the same as before.
Women should work without causing trouble at home. Why should I have to sacrifice for your jobs?
With that attitude, it was impossible to have a meaningful conversation. I had no choice but to adjust my work schedule and manage as best I could. However, when Ethan turned 6 and started elementary school, I returned to full-time work from reduced hours. Not long after that, I was assigned a business trip. I needed to take an overnight business trip to a company I had been working with for some time. Since I was the primary contact, it was difficult to hand the responsibility over to someone else. I have to be out of town for 5 days. Could you help with Ethan while I'm gone? I turned to Karen for help. She had always been there for me, and she readily agreed to watch Ethan. But just before my trip, Karen fell ill and had to be hospitalized. Oh no, I'm worried about Karen. But what am I going to do about Ethan? Is there any chance I can find a sitter to take care of him overnight on such short notice? I was starting to panic when, unexpectedly, Max offered to help.
Hey, Amanda, did you forget me? I can take care of him this time.
I was surprised because I never expected my husband to offer such words. He hadn't lifted a finger to help with Ethan before, so why now? Could it be that he's finally starting to act like a dad? Whatever the reason, it was a relief to know that Max would look after Ethan. Though I was nervous about his inexperience, I decided to trust him and hoped he would grow into the role. In the few days before my trip, I taught him everything he needed to know, such as managing the household and caring for Ethan. At the same time, a hurricane was expected to hit our area, which added to my worries. But I made all the necessary preparations and chose to trust Max with everything. As expected, the hurricane hit just after I left. Since I was far from home, I wasn't affected at all. In fact, the skies were clear and sunny where I was. But even under that bright blue sky, I couldn't shake the unease in my chest. A severe weather warning had been issued for our town, and Ethan's school was closed for the day. So that means it's just Max and Ethan alone all day today. I couldn't help but feel anxious. Would Max, who had never taken care of Ethan before, really be able to handle him the whole day? Even though I had explained everything multiple times and told myself I'd trust him, I was still overwhelmed with worry. So I decided to call Max to check if the hurricane was affecting anything and to see how Ethan was doing.
Everything's fine. Amanda, you worry too much. I am his dad, you know? Nothing to stress about.
I had feared Max would get irritated if anything had gone wrong, so hearing his cheerful voice put me at ease. After all, it looks like Max is doing just fine. I was overthinking. Relieved, I ended the call, feeling like a weight had been lifted from my chest. But shortly after, I got a surprising call from someone I never expected. An hour later, I received a call from my sister's husband, Alex. Wait, what do you mean? I couldn't make sense of what Alex was telling me at first. Ethan had been found tied up to the doghouse in the yard. We did have a doghouse in the backyard. We used to have a dog until Ethan was 5, but after the dog passed away, we left the house untouched in the yard. I had intended to put it away to prevent accidents, especially with the hurricane coming, and I thought I had stored it in the shed. But somehow, it had ended up back outside, and Ethan had been tied to it. Once I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding, panic hit me. Why on earth would he do something like that during a hurricane? After finishing the call with Alex, I immediately tried calling Max. But no matter how many times I called, he wouldn't pick up. With no way to reach him, I decided this was an emergency. I interrupted my business trip and rushed to the hospital where Ethan had been taken. When I arrived, I stood frozen by my son's bed, stunned. If I'd known this would happen, I never would have gone on my trip. I knew it would be hard to refuse the trip after my workplace had been so flexible with me while Ethan was younger. Still, I couldn't help but blame myself. Even though I couldn't get in touch with Max, I knew he was responsible for this situation. I regretted trusting him, and anger toward him surged within me. So Ethan was left home alone, which means Max must have gone somewhere, right? He had promised to take care of Ethan, but abandoned him instead. I couldn't forgive him for that. As a result, someone had found Ethan tied to the doghouse, outside in the hurricane, and now lying here silent in the hospital bed. But maybe Max had some kind of emergency? Trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, I tried calling him again, but still no answer. Where are you, Max? What could you be doing? Did something happen to you too? My anger gradually gave way to concern. Hoping to find any clue as to what had happened, I left the hospital and returned home. It didn't take long to find exactly what I was looking for. And what I found in the house, and a certain testimony, brought to light the culprit and the whole story. It was worse than I could have ever imagined. I'll make sure whoever did this gets what's coming to them. No mercy. Shaking with a fury I had never felt before, I made that vow to myself. 3 days later, Max finally returned home. I stayed hidden, watching him from inside the house. Before stepping through the front door, Max glanced toward the yard. When he saw the spot where the doghouse used to be, his face went pale.
Could it be? Did Ethan get blown away with the doghouse?
Of course, the doghouse wasn't there anymore because I had already gotten rid of it. Max, realizing the house was gone, was visibly shaken. Even though it was just a misunderstanding, the reality was that an unsecured doghouse and a small 6-year-old child could easily have been swept away by the hurricane. And yet, he went ahead with such a stupid idea without thinking. Peeking through the gap in the curtains, I glared at him. Max, seemingly deciding to enter the house for now, nervously headed toward the entrance. When he stepped into the living room, he was greeted by the sight of me standing there, seething with rage.
Why are you here? The trip wasn't supposed to end until tomorrow.
Clearly rattled, Max tried to back away, but I stepped forward. Where's Ethan? I don't see him. Believing that Ethan had been blown away along with the doghouse, Max grew even more frantic. He glanced around wildly, struggling for words, then suddenly flashed a bright, fake smile.
Oh, he's at the park with his friends. That's why he's not home right now.
Realizing he was caught, Max tried to cover things up with a hasty excuse. So, he'll be back by evening? What excuse are you going to give then? Do you really think you can keep lying to me?
What are you talking about? I didn't.
Don't even try to deny it. I know you tied Ethan to the doghouse. So it wasn't that Max had left Ethan home alone, and he somehow got caught up in some kind of incident. The truth was, Max himself was the one who tied our son to the doghouse. Ethan told me everything. We were so lucky he was okay. All thanks to Karen and Alex. When I arrived at the hospital, Ethan was unconscious. Fortunately, he made it through. And just as I was searching for answers back at the house, I got the call that he had woken up. It was only because Karen and Alex had been concerned about Ethan that he was found so quickly. Karen knew that Max never helped with childcare, and with a hurricane approaching, she was worried about Ethan, just like I was. She asked Alex, who had come to visit her in the hospital, to check on Ethan. If not for them, my son might have been left like that until my business trip ended. But thanks to their quick actions, Ethan was found tied to the doghouse that same day, and I was able to return right away. Still, Ethan had been exposed to heavy rain and strong winds for hours, leaving him weak and unconscious, which is why he had to be admitted to the hospital for treatment and observation. He's recovering well now.
What the hell? If he's fine, then why did you ask me where he was? Were you trying to trick me?
How can you say that? I was going to tell you that he's okay so you could stop worrying as long as you were truly sorry for what you did. Max yelled, but it was clear that everything that had happened was his fault. And what gives you the right to act like this is my fault?
Because Ethan's fine now, right? So technically, I didn't do anything wrong.
His complete lack of remorse made my anger boil over again. Don't mess with me. You didn't do anything for our 6-year-old son. What did you think I was trusting you to do while I was gone? Not only did Max leave Ethan tied to the doghouse, but he didn't even prepare food for him. According to Ethan, Max had said,
If you're hungry, eat this.
and all he gave him was a whole apple. The problem is, Ethan is allergic to apples. Naturally, he refused to eat it. I'm so thankful Ethan knew enough about his allergy to say no. If he had been too timid to refuse, who knows what might have happened. I had made sure to repeatedly warn Max about Ethan's allergy, but he clearly hadn't listened to a word I'd said.
I can't eat apples.
When Ethan refused the apple, Max just assumed he was being picky. He shouted, "If you're going to be picky, then don't eat anything." It seemed he found it bothersome when Ethan asked for something else to eat.
This is what I call discipline.
He said, laughing as he tied Ethan to the doghouse.
You think you can talk back to me? Let's see how you like this.
As if that wasn't enough, Max taped Ethan's mouth shut and then left. Ethan was unable to call for help, and as the wind picked up, he grew more and more terrified. Thinking about how scared Ethan must have been made my chest tighten. Max might not have left during the peak of the storm, but he knew a hurricane was coming. Leaving a child unattended is already bad enough, but during weather like that, you put Ethan's life in danger. I glared fiercely at Max. And you think it's okay just because he's safe now? Absolutely not. When I saw Max avert his eyes in guilt, I felt myself calm down a bit. I realized that confronting him like this wouldn't corner him the way I wanted, so I took a deep breath to compose myself. So, where exactly did you go, leaving our son alone? Max mumbled, barely audible.
I had to leave for an urgent work thing.
Oh, please. Still lying, huh? I know you went on a trip and left Ethan behind.
What? How did you?
You really think I wouldn't notice what you left behind? He clearly hadn't expected me to come back early from my trip. When I returned home, I found everything laid out in plain sight in the living room. There were notes outlining his travel plans, a printed itinerary, brochures with sticky notes on various pages, and even a hotel reservation confirmation. And on one of the notes, there was a woman's name listed as his travel companion. The hotel confirmation said you booked a single room with a double bed. On top of that, a trip with a woman who's neither your wife nor your girlfriend, not even in separate rooms or twin beds, but a double bed. However, that wasn't all. Among the documents left in the living room, there were even printed out email exchanges with that woman. It seemed like he printed them to help plan their trip, as they included her preferences about the vacation. But the messages also contained words like "I love you" and flirtatious conversations hinting at intimate nights, making it clear she was his mistress. When I called him from my business trip, Max sounded unusually cheerful, and now I knew it was because he was with her. So basically, this was a cheating trip, wasn't it? I waved the printed emails in front of him, and Max's face betrayed his panic.
We never actually went on that trip. We were just planning it, that's all. It was just wishful thinking, you know, like, wouldn't it be fun if we could? That's why the emails looked that way.
Oh, really? I asked, making sure my voice dripped with disbelief, and Max quickly nodded.
Yeah, and that woman in the emails? She's based on you, Amanda. I just thought, if Amanda wasn't away on business, I could take her on this trip. I kind of got carried away with the idea.
With a sigh, I shot back at him. Cut it out. If I talk to the police about our son and they check the hotel security cameras, it'll be clear if you went or not. Are you sure you want to keep up this lie? At that, Max seemed to realize he couldn't wriggle out of it, and suddenly shifted his tone to brazen defiance.
So what if I did? The only reason I agreed to babysit was because I thought it'd mean you'd go on your business trip.
In a bitter tone, Max confessed that the timing of my business trip aligned perfectly with his mistress pressuring him to take her on vacation. He had planned to go on the trip while I was away, but his sister, who was supposed to watch our son, fell ill, and he panicked, worried I'd cancel my trip. He figured that if he volunteered to look after Ethan, I'd leave without hesitation. But Max had no intention of caring for Ethan properly. He had just planned to leave some food around and head off on his cheating trip as planned. This explained why he ignored everything I said before I left, seeing my instructions as mere nagging.
So giving Ethan that apple? That wasn't on purpose. I just forgot about his allergy.
No, that's still a big problem. What kind of father forgets his child's allergy for 6 years? And there's no excuse for locking him in the doghouse either. Up until I got home, I had worried it might have been a robbery. It's pure luck that Ethan was saved thanks to my sister. It could have easily been the worst-case scenario. Max's face paled as he seemed to recall the moment I came home, panicked that Ethan might have been trapped in that doghouse during a storm. Do you realize that putting a child in that kind of danger is a crime? I'm ready to report this to the police right now. Max's complexion grew even paler.
Please, don't. Anything but the police.
It seemed he never thought I'd actually involve the authorities. He clung to me, on the verge of tears.
I'll break up with her, I swear. I'll do housework and help with Ethan, whatever it takes. We're family, aren't we?
Cheating and avoiding your responsibilities aren't bargaining chips. They're just the bare minimum.
I mean it this time. I don't want Ethan growing up with just one parent. Please, give me another chance.
His empty promises were laughable, and I surprised even myself with how cold my voice sounded. A chance. Words are cheap. And it's too late for that. As far as Ethan and I are concerned, you're not just unnecessary, but you're dangerous. Not only had Max failed to act like a father, but he had actively harmed Ethan. How could I ever trust someone like that around my child again? I'm reporting this to the police, and the divorce is happening. I'll also make sure you pay alimony and child support. Max's face went from pale to ghostly white, and he collapsed to his knees, looking like he was about to pass out. While he was frozen in shock, I called the police, and they took him away without resistance. Later, Max received a 3-year prison sentence, but it was suspended. Although he avoided actual jail time, his life would never return to normal. I made sure to demand $20,000 in alimony and $85,000 in child support up front. With no other option, Max had to take out loans, and now he's working tirelessly just to pay them back. He had also lied to his mistress, telling her he was single. And when I demanded $15,000 from her in compensation, she found out the truth and dumped him. He lives alone now, drowning in debt. Ethan, on the other hand, has fully recovered and is excited about his upcoming school trip. I owe his recovery to my sister and her husband, and I'll never forget their kindness. Every day, I savor Ethan's smiles, feeling grateful for the happiness we have now.